Hey there. My name is Darian Vale. I live at the end of Willow Street in the border town of Greyhaven, where the northern wall casts its long shadow over the last row of stone houses. I copy books for the merchants and fix tools for anyone who brings them to my small workshop. It is quiet work. Most days I sit at my bench with a lamp and a stack of pages, or I hammer dents out of copper pots and straighten bent hinges. I do not complain. Quiet suits me. 6 months ago, the house next to mine was taken by a woman named Marin Stonewillow. She was an orc, tall enough that she had to duck slightly when she stepped through her own doorway. Her skin was a pale green that caught the light, like riverstone, and her eyes were so dark they seemed to swallow whatever they looked at. She wore a heavy cloak even on warm days and moved without sound, which was strange for someone of her size. People said she was a widow. They said her husband had died somewhere in the northern passes 3 years earlier. I did not ask for details. In Greyhaven, the people who lived longest were the ones who minded their own business. I noticed her anyway. Every morning she watered a small garden behind her house where she grew strange herbs I had never seen sold in the market. In the afternoons, she walked into the black pine forest with an empty basket and returned at dusk with roots, mushrooms, and bundles of leaves. Sometimes she left small parcels of dried herbs on the doorsteps of the sick without knocking or asking for payment. When old Mrs. Halver's roof leaked during the spring storms, Marin appeared before dawn and held the broken beams in place while the dwarves who lived across the lane repaired them. She never explained herself. She simply did what needed doing and left. I helped her a few times. Once I fixed the hinges on her gate after a storm twisted them. Another time, I replaced a wheel on her cart when she returned from the forest with it wobbling. Once, after she came back limping from the trees with blood on her sleeve, I left a pot of stew on her step. Each time she only nodded once the way orcs do when they accept a debt they intend to repay later, and closed her door. That was all we were to each other until the night she knocked. It was past midnight when the 3 knocks came. They were not frantic. They were deliberate, evenly spaced, the kind of knock someone makes when they have already decided they will not leave until the door opens. I pulled on a shirt, lit the oil lamp, and opened the door. Marin stood under the narrow overhang. For the first time since she had moved in, she was not wearing her cloak. The black patterns on her skin were visible, running from the sides of her neck down both arms in thin branching lines that looked almost alive. They seemed to shift with her breathing. In her hands she held a small box, made of dark wood, wrapped tightly with red cord. "Darian," she said. Her voice was low and steady, but there was something tight underneath it. "I need your help." I looked at her face. She did not look injured. "Are you hurt?" "No," she said, "but my people are dying." I stepped back without thinking and let her inside. She entered as if the threshold itself might push her out again. She stood in the center of my small room, the box held against her chest, and waited while I set the lamp on the table. Then she removed the iron bracelet from her left wrist. The black patterns flared red. "I am not only a widow," she said. "I am the last living priestess of the Stone Willow bloodline." She placed the box on my table and untied the red cord. Inside lay a black stone pendant on a leather thong, a ritual knife with a bone handle, and a rolled piece of cured hide covered in old orc script. She did not touch them. She only looked at them for a moment before she spoke again. 3 years ago, her husband Tharok had gone north into the ice fields, searching for a root that was said to cure the sickness that had begun to appear among the old families of Stone Willow. The sickness did not kill quickly. It drained strength first, then the ability to have children, then life itself. Only those who carried the oldest blood were affected. Marin was one of the few who remained healthy. They had tried every remedy the tribe knew. Nothing worked. "The elders discovered something in the old records," she said. "Humans who carry even a small amount of older blood do not suffer from it. When Stone Willow kept to itself for too many generations, the blood grew thin. That is why we are dying." She looked at me directly. "I am asking you to enter a blood pact with me." I did not answer right away. The words sat between us like something sharp. "What does that mean? To your people, it would be called marriage," she said. "To mine, it is more. 2 lives become 1 line. The children born of it belong to both. If the pact is accepted, it becomes proof that Stone Willow can survive by opening instead of closing. Other families will follow if they see it can be done without losing who we are." She waited. I could hear the wind moving against the shutters. "You want me to marry you," I said at last. "I want you to stand with me before the ancestors and before the law of Greyhaven," she answered. "I want the child we might have to be raised, knowing both bloods. I want the people who are still healthy in my tribe to see that survival does not require us to stay the same." I took a step back without meaning to. 6 months ago, this woman had been only the quiet neighbor who grew strange plants. Now she was asking me to become the bridge between her dying line and whatever future might still exist for it. "Why me?" "Because I watched you," she said, "for 6 months. You leave food for the stray dogs behind the smithy. You fixed the old soldier's crutch without being asked. You ran 3 streets to return a dropped purse to an elf who could not see well enough to notice it was gone. You do these things and then forget them. That is the kind of person I need standing beside me when the tribe looks at us and decides whether change is possible." I sat down on the bench by the wall. My hands felt heavy. "If I say no?" "You remain my neighbor," she said. "Nothing more will be asked. But if no one accepts what must change, Stone Willow will be gone in 2 generations." She did not plead. She did not cry. She simply placed the truth in front of me and let it stay there. I asked about the child that might come from such a pact. She told me any child would be taught both languages and both histories, and would be free to choose where they belonged. She would not raise it only as a tool to save the tribe. I told her I would not give only my name and my blood and then walk away. If I did this, I wanted to know the people I was being asked to join. I wanted to understand what we were trying to keep alive. Marin's shoulders eased for the first time since she had entered. "You will be told everything," she said. I still did not give her an answer. I told her I needed time. She nodded, rewrapped the box, and stood. At the door she paused. "I know this is too much to ask in one night. How long did you think about it before you knocked?" 6 months, she said. "I came to Greyhaven to find someone. I did not expect that person to live on the other side of my wall." She left. The patterns on her arms had faded back to black. I did not sleep. I sat at the table with the lamp burning low and thought about a people I had never met placing their hope in a man who repaired broken hinges for a living. I thought about the look in Marin's eyes when she spoke of the husband she had lost and the family still fading. I thought about what it would mean to say yes to a life I had never imagined. When the sky began to lighten, I walked across the narrow space between our houses and knocked on her door. She opened it wearing the same dark dress she had worn the night before. Her eyes were tired, but steady. "I cannot promise I will be a good husband," I said, "but I am willing to go to Stone Willow. I want to see what I am being asked to protect before I decide." Marin looked at me for a long time. Then she held out her hand. "We begin with the truth then," she said. I took it. I took her hand. It was larger than mine, the skin cool and marked with faint calluses from years of working with roots and stone. She did not squeeze. She simply held on for a moment, as if sealing something that had not yet been spoken aloud, then let go and stepped back to let me inside. The morning light came through her windows in thin strips. Her house smelled of dried herbs and wood smoke. A kettle sat on the small iron stove, already warm. She poured 2 cups without asking and set one in front of me at the narrow table. We sat across from each other like 2 people who had suddenly found themselves responsible for more than they had expected. "Tell me what this pact actually requires," I said. Marin wrapped both hands around her cup. The black patterns on her arms were visible again in the daylight, though they no longer glowed. "It is not a contract written on paper," she said. "It is a binding made in front of the ancestors and witnessed by the living. Once it is done, our lives are considered one line. What belongs to me belongs to you, and what belongs to you belongs to me. If we have children, they carry both names and both bloods. They are not required to choose one over the other." She paused, searching for words I would understand. "To your people it would look like marriage. To mine, it is older and heavier. It means that if Stone Willow accepts the pact, every family still healthy enough to have children will see that it is possible to bring new blood in without destroying who we are. Some will follow, some will not. But the door will be open. I drank the tea. It tasted of pine and something sweet I could not name. "And if I say yes," I asked, "what do you expect from me?" "Honesty," she said. "Presence. The willingness to stand in front of people who will not trust you at first. I will not ask you to lie about why you came. I will not ask you to pretend this began with love, but I will ask you not to leave halfway through when it becomes difficult." I looked at her across the table. She was not pleading. She was stating terms the way someone states the weight of a load they have already decided to carry. "I need to know something," I said. "Did you choose me only because I am convenient, or because you believe I can actually do this?" Marin set her cup down. For the first time since she had knocked on my door, she looked uncertain. "At first it was because you were convenient," she admitted. "You lived next to me. You were kind without being weak. You did not look at orcs as enemies or prizes. That was enough to make me consider you. But 6 months is a long time to watch someone through a wall. I saw how you speak to the old dwarves at the market. I saw how you fix things for people who cannot pay. I saw that you do not keep score. Those things are not convenient. They are rare." She met my eyes. "I am not asking you to save my people out of pity. I am asking you to stand with me while we try to save ourselves. If you cannot do that honestly, then do not do it at all." I nodded. The answer was harder than I had expected and more honest. We talked for a long time that morning. She told me about the old records the elders had found, proof that Stone Willow had once married outside the tribe before the long wars made every stranger a threat. She told me the sickness had grown worse with every generation that refused to change. She told me the child, if there was one, would be taught both human and orc ways, and would be free to walk between them. I asked what would happen if the child was born weak or if the pact failed to stop the sickness. Marin answered without hesitation. "Then we would have tried, and the child would still have 2 parents who chose each other instead of being forced into it." I sat with that for a while. Outside, someone was hammering on the street. A dog barked. Normal sounds of a town that did not know 2 people were deciding the future of an entire bloodline over tea. "I still need time," I said finally. "Not because I think you are lying, because this is not the life I planned for myself." "I did not plan for it either," Marin said. "But plans are for people who have the luxury of time. My people do not." She stood and collected the cups. Before she turned away, she added one more thing. "If you decide against it, nothing between us will change. You will still be the man who fixes hinges and leaves stew on doorsteps. I will still be the woman who grows strange plants. We will remain neighbors. That is all." She did not say it as a threat or a plea. She said it as a fact that, more than anything, made me trust her. I left her house and walked back to mine. The rest of the day passed slowly. I tried to copy a merchant's ledger, but kept losing my place. I tried to fix a broken plowshare and nicked my thumb twice. Every time I looked out the window, I saw her garden, the neat rows of plants she tended without asking for thanks. At night, I lay awake again. I thought about what it would mean to become someone's husband, not because of feeling, but because of need. I thought about standing in front of orcs who had every reason to hate the idea of a human in their bloodline. I thought about a child who might one day ask why its parents had chosen each other. I thought about Marin's face when she spoke of the family still dying quietly in the northern holds. By morning, I knew what I was going to do. I walked back to her door. She opened it before I knocked, as if she had been waiting. She wore the same dark dress, and her hair was tied back with a strip of leather. She looked tired, but calm. "I will go with you to Stone Willow," I said. "I want to see the place and the people before I give a final answer. If after that I still cannot do it, I will tell you honestly. But I will not decide from here without knowing what I am being asked to protect." Marin studied me for a long moment. Then she nodded once, the way she had the first time I fixed her gate. "We leave in 2 days," she said. "Pack warm. The mountains are colder than they look." She did not smile. Neither did I. But when she held out her hand again, I took it without hesitation. This time the grip lasted longer. 2 days later, we left Greyhaven before the sun had fully cleared the northern wall. Marin carried a bow across her back, a long knife at her hip, and a satchel of dried herbs and medicines. I carried food, blankets, and the small kit of tools I never traveled without. We did not speak much as we passed through the gates. The guards watched us go but said nothing. In a town like Greyhaven, two people walking north together did not require explanation. The road into the Black Pine was narrow and old. For the first day, we followed it through stands of dark trees that smelled of resin and damp earth. On the second day, the path began to climb and the air grew colder. Marin moved with the steady pace of someone who had walked these trails many times. I kept up without complaint, though my legs ached by evening. On the third night, we camped beside a narrow stream. After we ate, Marin spoke more about the place we were going. "Stone Willow has never been a tribe of warriors," she said. "We kept the old roads through the mountains. We grew medicines that other orcs came to trade for. Our priestesses remembered the agreements between tribes and made sure they were kept. That was our strength." She fed another branch into the fire. "My husband, Thorok, was a hunter. When the sickness began to take the old families, he went north into the ice to find a route the records spoke of. Only one of his party returned. The rest were lost in a storm." I watched the flames for a while before I answered. "I am not trying to take his place." "I know," she said, "and I am not asking you to." She told me that among her people the heart was understood to be large enough to hold memory and still make room for what came after. The pact we might make would not erase what she had lost. It would only add to it. On the fourth day, the trees thinned and the mountains rose steep on either side. We followed a trail that wound between great stone faces until late in the afternoon we came to Stone Willow Hold. It was built into the side of the mountain and among the roots of enormous trees whose trunks were wider than houses. Wooden walkways and stone terraces connected the dwellings. Smoke rose from several chimneys. The air smelled of pine resin, wet moss, and cooking meat. Our arrival was not welcomed. Warriors standing guard at the outer path watched us approach with open suspicion. Several pulled children inside when they saw me. An older orc woman spat on the ground as we passed. Marin walked with her head high and did not slow. I followed her lead and kept my hands visible and empty. We were taken to a long hall built around the base of one of the great trees. Inside, a circle of elders and warriors waited. At the center stood a tall orc with a deep scar running from his left eye down across his cheek. Marin had told me his name on the trail, Vorgath Ashskar, younger brother of her late husband and commander of the Hold's defenders. He looked at me the way a hunter looks at an unfamiliar animal that has wandered too close to the camp. "Why have you brought this one here?" he asked Marin. "Because the records are clear," she answered. "Human blood once strengthened our line. It can do so again. Darian has agreed to come and see what we are before any decision is made." Vorgath turned his gaze on me. "And what do you want, human? Land? Secrets? A strong orc woman to warm your bed while you tell stories in your towns?" I met his eyes without reaching for any weapon. "I have not agreed to the pact," I said. "I came because your sister asked for help and because I wanted to understand what I was being asked to protect. That is all." He studied me for a long moment, then made a sound of disgust and turned away. The elders began to speak among themselves in low voices. Marin stood beside me without touching me, but I could feel the tension in her shoulders. Over the next several days, she showed me the hold. I saw the terraced gardens where medicines had been grown for generations. I saw the great library carved into the living wood of the oldest tree, its walls covered in careful script. I saw the wooden aqueducts that carried clean water from the mountain springs down to the lower terraces. Many of the channels were rotting, water leaked where it should have flowed, and several of the lower gardens were beginning to wither. I did not ask permission, I simply began to work. On the second morning, I took my tools to the highest broken channel and started replacing the worst sections with new wood and iron bands I had brought. By the third day, several young orcs had come to watch. One of them stayed to help. On the fourth day, I repaired a roof that had collapsed during the last heavy rain, working alongside two warriors who said little, but handed me what I needed. I also saw the cost of the sickness. There were warriors who could no longer lift their spears without trembling. Women who had lost child after child. Young people whose bodies looked strong but whose eyes held the exhaustion of something slowly draining them. Marin moved among them without ceremony, leaving bundles of herbs and speaking quietly. I watched and said nothing. On the fifth evening, I was still working on the water channels when Vorgath found me. He stood on the path above and watched me hammer a new brace into place. "You are trying to buy their favor," he said. "I am repairing what is broken," I answered without looking up. "That is what I do. So, you can stand in front of the council and claim you have earned the right to take our bloodline into your hands." I set the hammer down and straightened. "I have not agreed to anything yet. I am here because your sister needed someone who would not lie to her people about why he came. If that offends you, I will leave when she tells me to leave." Vorgath was silent for a long time. The only sound was water dripping from the repaired channel. Before he turned to go, he placed something on the stone beside my tools. It was a hammer, heavier and better balanced than the one I had been using. The handle was worn smooth from long use. He did not speak again. He simply walked away. I picked up the hammer. It fit my hand well. I used it for the rest of the evening and did not return it. That night, when I returned to the small guest house Marin had given me, she was waiting outside. She looked at the hammer in my hand but did not comment on it. "Tomorrow, the elders will speak again," she said. "Some are beginning to listen. Not many, but some." I nodded. The mountains were dark above us, and the lights of the hold glowed warm in the terraces below. "I am not doing this to make them like me," I said. "I know," she answered. We stood there a moment longer. Then she turned and walked toward her own dwelling without saying good night. I watched her go, the new hammer still in my hand, and wondered how many more quiet gestures would be needed before the tribe decided whether a human could be trusted with what they were losing. After 3 weeks in Stone Willow, the elders finally allowed me to read the old records. Marin took me deep beneath the roots of the largest tree in the hold, where the air was cool and smelled of earth and old wood. Yagra Fernzier, the eldest of the remaining priestesses, walked with us. She was smaller than Marin and walked with a slight limp, but her eyes missed nothing. We passed through a heavy wooden door carved with symbols I could not read and entered a long chamber lit by oil lamps set into the walls. Shelves of cured hide and wooden tablets lined both sides of the room. Some were so old the writing had begun to fade. Yagra lit an additional lamp and placed it on a stone table in the center. "Read," she said simply. I spent many hours there over the next 2 days. Marin stayed with me most of the time, translating the older scripts when my understanding faltered. What I learned was not what I had expected. The sickness was not a curse placed upon them by angry spirits or vengeful gods. It had appeared gradually after Stone Willow closed its borders to outsiders during the Long Wars. The ban on marriage with other peoples had been meant to keep spies and enemies from entering their strongholds. After the wars ended, the rule remained as tradition. Generation after generation, the blood grew thinner. The sickness grew stronger with each passing decade. Marin sat across from me one evening as I closed another tablet. "They did not mean to destroy themselves," she said quietly. "They only wanted to remain who they were. But they are dying because of it," I answered. She nodded. The next morning, the council met again. This time, I was allowed to stand with Marin before them. Vorgath was there, arms crossed, his scarred face unreadable. After much debate, the elders reached a decision. The blood pact would be permitted only if both of us passed 3 confirmations. They called them the 3 truths. The first required me to stand before the entire hold and speak honestly about why I had come. I did so 2 days later in the great hall beneath the central tree. I told them I had not fallen in love with Marin at first sight. I told them a neighbor had knocked on my door in the middle of the night and asked for help, and that I could not turn away once I understood what was being lost. I also told them I was afraid. I was afraid I would never truly belong among them. I was afraid I would make a poor husband. I was afraid any child we might have would be claimed by neither people and would grow up belonging nowhere. I promised I would not hide those fears behind noble words. When I finished, the hall was silent for a long time. The second confirmation belonged to Marin. She had to speak plainly about why she had chosen me. She stood in the same place the next evening. She admitted that when she first moved to Greyhaven, she had watched me as one watches a possible solution to a problem. But over 6 months, she had begun to wait for the sound of my footsteps outside her wall. She had kept broken tools instead of repairing them herself because she knew I would come. She had felt the cold inner house lessen on the evenings I crossed the narrow space between our doors to drink tea. "I went to his door for the sake of Stone Willow," she said, "but I want him to remain for my own sake." No one interrupted her. Even Vorgath remained silent. The third confirmation was the most difficult. We were taken into the sacred forest beyond the hold and left alone with only a small pack of food and a single blanket. No elder, no warrior, no witness would follow us. We were to spend one night beside a fire we built ourselves. At dawn, each of us could choose to return to the hold or walk away in a different direction. If only one of us returned, the pact would be considered refused and never spoken of again. We walked for half a day before we found a sheltered place between two great roots. The trees here were older and quieter than any I had seen. We gathered dry wood and built a small fire as the light faded. For a long while we sat without speaking, listening to the crackle of the flames and the distant calls of night birds. Marin spoke first. "Tharok was a good man," she said. "He laughed loudly and carried too many weapons. He believed problems could be solved by going farther and hunting harder than anyone else. When the sickness came, he could not sit still and watch it take his people. That was why he went north." I fed another branch into the fire. "I am not jealous of a dead man," I said, "but I am jealous of the years he had with you before I knew your name." Marin looked at me across the flames. "You would not ask me to forget him?" "No," I said. "I would only ask that there still be room beside those memories for what we might build." She was quiet for a long time. Then she asked the question I had been waiting for. "Do you truly want a life with me, Darian, or is this only duty to people who are not your own?" I looked into the fire for a while before I answered. "Duty brought me up the mountain," I said. "It is not why I want to stay. I want to go back to the two houses with the door between them. I want to argue with you about whether the windows should be open in winter. I want to fix the things you break and have you complain that I organize your tools too neatly. And if we have a child, I want to be there not as the man who gave blood to save a tribe, but as its father." Marin's eyes shone in the firelight. She did not speak. She simply reached across the space between us and took my hand. Her fingers were warm and steady. We did not sleep much that night. We talked until the fire burned low, then sat in silence as the sky began to pale. When the first light touched the tops of the trees, we stood together and walked back toward the hold without needing to discuss it. Vorgath was waiting at the outer path. He saw our joined hands and stepped aside without a word. As we passed, he spoke quietly. "Do not make her a widow a second time." "I will try to live long enough to annoy her instead," I answered. For the first time since I had met him, Vorgath smiled. It was small and brief, but it was real. When we reached the council hall, Yagra Fernseer was already waiting. She looked at both of us, then nodded once. "The three truths have been spoken and answered," she said. "The pact may proceed." The ritual took place at dusk beneath the great central tree. I wore a simple gray robe of human make with a sash of dark leather across my chest, bearing the carved stone willow of stone willow. Marin stood beside me in a deep green ceremonial dress, the black stone pendant resting against her collarbone. Her hair was unbound for the first time since I had known her. The entire hold had gathered in silence around the roots. Yagra Fernseer performed the rite herself. She did not ask us to cut our palms or swear oaths in blood. Instead, she took two cords. One dyed the gray of human cloth, the other the deep green of orc forest dye, and laid them across the ritual knife. With one clean motion, she cut each cord in half, then gathered the four pieces and began to braid them together into a single, stronger cord. When the braid was finished, she bound it gently around both our wrists, tying the knot so that it rested between our joined hands. Marin spoke first. "I vow that I will never treat this man as a tool for the survival of my people. He is not a bridge I will cross and then forget. Whatever comes from this pact, I will protect it as I protect my own life." I answered without looking away from her. "I vow that I will not use this bond to claim land, secrets, or power that does not belong to me. I came here because someone asked for help. I remain because I choose to remain. Any child born of us will know both of our worlds and will never be forced to deny half of who they are." Yagra Fernseer nodded once. The cord around our wrists was warm from the heat of our skin. When the rite ended, the whole did not cheer. Orcs do not celebrate such things with noise. But several of the elders came forward and touched their foreheads to ours in turn. Even Vorgath stepped close. He did not speak, but he placed one heavy hand on my shoulder for a moment before turning away. We returned to Greyhaven 3 days later. The two houses at the end of Willow Street were joined by a new door cut through the shared stone wall. It was simple work, but it changed the feel of both rooms. Marin kept her garden and her strange herbs. I kept my workbench and my stacks of copied pages. We did not pretend the change had made everything easy. We argued about small things. She liked the windows open even in winter because orcs do not feel the cold the way humans do. I would wake shivering and close them again. She thought tools did not need to be sorted by size and purpose. I thought the evidence of her workbench proved otherwise. Each time we disagreed, we returned to the same rule we had made on the mountain. We spoke the truth, even when it was inconvenient. News of the pact traveled. Some humans in Greyhaven muttered that I had been bewitched, or that I was trying to claim orc wealth. Some orcs in the northern holds called Marin a traitor to her blood. We did not answer them with speeches. We simply continued living. Marin treated the sick in Greyhaven without asking their names or their blood. I returned to Stone Willow once each month to finish repairing the aqueducts and to teach the younger orcs how to bind iron joints that would not rot. Slowly, other changes began. A young orc warrior asked permission to court a human woman who worked at the trading post. An orc widow started leaving extra bread at the door of the dwarf blacksmith who had repaired her family's weapons for years. Human healers came to the hold to learn which forest plants treated fever. Orc midwives began sending for human physicians when a birth grew difficult. 1 year after the pact, Marin told me she was carrying a child. We kept the news quiet at first. She had lost one before in the years after Thurok died, and the fear of hoping too soon was real. For many nights, I would wake in the dark and reach across the bed to feel the steady rise and fall of her breathing. She would grumble without opening her eyes, but she never told me to stop. Our daughter was born on a clear morning in early spring. She had pale green skin, brown eyes like mine, and ears that came to a soft point. We named her Elira, after my mother and after the first priestess of Stone Willow, whose name still appeared in the oldest records. She was healthy. The healers examined her many times. There was no trace of the sickness that had taken so many before her. When the news reached Stone Willow, the hold changed in ways no single pact could have forced. A young warrior formally requested to marry the human woman he had been seeing in secret. Another orc woman began openly walking with the dwarf blacksmith. The council met for 3 days and finally lifted the old ban on marriage outside the tribe. In its place, they wrote new laws that protected the right of any person to choose freely and ensured that children of mixed blood would inherit from both lines. Stone Willow did not vanish. It did not surrender its forests, its medicines, or its memory of the old agreements. It simply stopped requiring its people to die in order to remain exactly as they had always been. Many years later, when Elira was old enough to ask questions, she would sometimes sit between us on the bench outside the joined houses and ask how her parents had met. Marin would answer that she had knocked on my door in the middle of the night and offered me a choice I could not refuse. I would correct her gently. I could have refused, I would say. That is why the choice mattered. Marin never argued with that. She would only reach over our daughter's head and rest her hand on mine, the braided cord we still sometimes wore on quiet evenings warm between our fingers. 3 knocks in the dark had begun it all. A woman carrying a black wooden box and the last hope of her people had stood under my narrow roof and asked whether I would help them live instead of simply watching them fade. I had said yes, not because I was brave or because I already loved her, but because the truth she offered me was larger than my fear. She had not forced me with the weight of her tribe's future. She had given me the truth and left me free to walk away. In the end, that freedom was what made my answer worth keeping. And in choosing to stay, I had been given more than I ever knew I was missing.